Is started.
Good evening. Sorry, I did my workout. You look good. Mr. Hickey, how are you? Thank you.
We are live.
It's April 26th. Good evening. This is a meeting of the Council Rock School District Board of School Directors Policy Committee meeting. And we're in order. Let's go around the table and introduce ourselves. I'm the chair, Ed Tate, School Director.
Mary Ann McKee, School Board.
Andy Block, School Board.
Bob Hickey, resident, Northampton Township. Chuck Lambert, Director of Special Services.
Matt Frederickson, Director of IT.
Thank you, everyone. Matt, thank you for organizing this meeting so effectively. And the first policy we're going to review is...
Mr. Tate, if I could just before we start, one of the board meetings was asked that we review the policies. I think it's 220 on student expression.
Right.
We contacted the solicitor, and she recommended no changes in that policy at this time. So we had recently approved it a few months ago, so there was no need to bring it back for the board.
Good. Thanks for the reminder, Frederickson. That I appreciate that. Yeah, we had just updated that policy this past year. And I'm glad the solicitor feels it's sufficient. We have another school director with us.
Joe Hidalgo.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for joining us. We'll start with policy 113.4. It is a new policy, confidentiality of special education student information. Mr. Laird, would you please?
I have looked at the revisions that I had noted. My one question was most of this policy is in effect for all students. So I'm not sure why it's specifically titled special education students, but I guess that's the way it is. Are there any other comments on this?
Is there a redundant policy that's out there that covers all students in the same way to where we have to do this, or is it one of these, another one of those PD requirements?
Policy 216.
Right.
What I did attach at the back of the packet that you have are the notes from PSBA as to why there are new policies and why they've made changes. So this is going to be a few parts. So 113. It's a new policy. That's all it says.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is, I think it's policy 216, if I'm not mistaken, is records, which I think was board approved maybe a month ago. It's very similar to this. I won't say it's exactly the same, but a lot of the same.
Unless we have to have that, if that's inclusive of the entire student population and covers all the things that this comes in, this would seem redundant if that's the case, but without looking it over again, I wouldn't know that.
I did talk with Lauren at PSBA. The difference between policy 216, which is student records, and this policy is, I think this references somewhere as additional information. Maybe I'm wrong. Does it store additional information for students with special needs? I didn't actually read through it.
Right.
Talks about the lead, the special education hearings and stuff like that.
Where it says records hearing? Is that what you're
Under the hearings, yeah.
Yeah, that's, that would be not necessarily a special ed due process hearing. That will be a hearing if a parent challenge the contents of a record, which is to some extent, in 216 as well. So I know that when we have a special education audit, we're required to produce certain policies. One of them is on records. I've always produced 216, and that's been satisfactory. So I don't know if maybe there was a request for some districts to have a separate one. I don't know.
I'll verify for this policy. I'll verify that we need to have 113.4. If not, we can just.
Yeah, and also just make sure that anything that's in here is covered in 216, just because in this case there is a blurb somewhere that's not there. Then we just make that one, beef that one up to reflect this.
Will do.
Thank you.
And to the same extent, we ought to make sure there's nothing conflicting. I'll glance at 216. That's 216. Right? Anybody have any other questions or concerns or thoughts about 113.4? If not,
It does just reference IEP in here, that's what I'm thinking. Is that what makes a difference on the second page under parental access rights? Talks about the IEP specifically.
That would be, that paragraph would be a difference, but again, that's relevant within the guidelines of the other policy.
what's your feeling, Joe? Please.
My feeling is that unless they can tell us why there's a need for it, I would do without.
All right, then shall we table?
And I made a note, I mean, I didn't go through word by word, but we did just do 216, I'm pretty sure it's pretty similar.
Yeah, as long as.
But I'll, like Mr. Hidalgo pointed out, that paragraph is obviously not in 216, but that same provision is available through 216.
Yeah.
So then we will table 113 if no one objects. All right, we'll move on to 142.
142 is policy on migrant students, not something we deal with a lot. I did check with both this policy, actually would not fall under me, but I did check with both Barry Detzko and Sue Elliott, and they felt that they were fine as they are. I know that some of these policies on migrant students and some of the other ones are requirements under Every Student Shall Succeed Act, so that might be a requirement that we have this policy. But there's nothing in it that's certainly problematic.
Is there a definition for what migrant student means? No, not on here, it's not here. I mean, what would we consider the definition for migrant?
In my career, I have never come across an issue dealing with migrant students. So I'd have to research that.
Based on the footnotes, it looks like it's spelled out in state law. I would hope. Matt,
Yeah, we
take a moment.
Migratory child shall be a child domiciled temporarily in a school district for the purpose of seasonal employment, without requiring residence therein. And a child accompanying his or her person with parental relation who is a domicile. There's your definition.
So there's nothing to do
Okay,
with
so that's either a child who's here because of employment or their parents are here. Okay, makes sense, got it.
yeah, and it has nothing to do with citizenship or immigration status or anything like that. All right, since this policy is required by state law, and we've received the only changes then are career and technical education as opposed to board vocation.
Yes, sir.
So this is an existing policy, and the only change is 4 words. Correct?
Correct.
All right, any questions, objections?
No.
All right, if not, we'll move this on.
I have a question. What's the difference between this old version and this new version? It's just kind of the format is the difference? Because this
No.
looks like this is the old, or is this, am I
It's
looking
the
at the
words,
wrong one?
it's the highlighted words, and numbers. lines.
Right, and the definition's gone, but this is still gonna look like this, right?
Let me explain, and I apologize. I should have gone over this with you, but I didn't. So our old version of storing policies on the school board was via PDF documents. We've moved to an electronic version now, housed on the website boarddocs.com. As we approve policies, our policies are being moved over to the new format. What's nice about them is it's easily searchable, shows the dates they were approved. So it's basically, it looks kind of like this.
Right. And we'll leave out the definition in the new version?
Definitions down here.
Okay,
And
be
there's also
referenced.
links here too. So
Okay.
all of this is still just in an online format.
okay.
And these criteria and definitions are set by the, just up the top, the purpose, where it says the whole policy is direct reiteration. Is that actually language for the policy, or was that some commentary? In the green.
So the green are comments.
Okay, so that's not going to actually show up in the policy because it's printed on here. Okay,
Someone type that.
okay, got it.
So I don't remember. It's been so long since.
These have been on the agenda before, we just didn't get to them at that
Snow
meeting.
days.
Right.
Yeah.
So this one, it says, according to this note, we'll talk about safety hazard policy.
I think that's probably the same you'll see later on. We have the policy on phosphorus placements.
Yep.
I think those are similar.
And the language is recommended by.
Actually, that would have been either Barry or me because this is Barry's domain.
I mean, that notation.
Yeah, I mean, we all talked about it. I was on the call back then. I don't know who wrote what in there. It was a couple months back, but that was the reason for it.
So for the uninitiated, including myself, this means that the administration has reviewed this policy and is bringing it forward as a recommendation.
Correct.
Right. Any questions, comments? If there are none, we'll move this forward for board consideration.
I mean, this is kind of a dumb question, but standards for victims of violent crimes. Is there a policy somewhere else that talks about other bad offenses that don't fall under the state's definition of violent crimes? It is just kind of,
I don't know. I have.
do our policies anywhere, administrative regulations allow us to transfer for severe bullying if we find that to be the case
Transfer within.
within the district?
Transfer where?
Students between schools.
I don't know that it's in administrative regulations.
I don't think it would be a policy, maybe on a one-on-one situation, someone requests, then that'd be considered. But this is saying if you your school meets that definition, or is this the one where,
No, you're correct.
yeah, then they have to be able to move.
I know that we have moved students from one building to another for various reasons.
So we have discretion outside of
Yeah.
this, okay.
All right, so we are.
And just out
now-
of curiosity, where is that somewhere in writing, or is that just something we?
If a parent for some reason wants their child to go to a school other than their geographically resident school,
Right.
we call that an out-of-boundary exception. They would be required to send a letter to Barry or Tesco.
Right.
Barry would then gather the relevant people based on whatever the reasoning is that the parent is given and make a decision as a team, whether it's appropriate
And
or
then
not.
there's another set of policies, so that have guidelines for those students. So as an example, somebody tries to use that rule to play sports at another school, they're not allowed to play
That's
sports at
pretty
that school. Got it, okay, all right, I remember now. Excellent, thank you.
Okay, so we are talking about another new policy, 144,
Which denotes that it's on the 143.
right, required by No Child Left Behind standards for victims of violent crimes. Dr. Lambert, do you have any comment on this?
No, just that it is required, the language is all consistent with what you would see from No Child Left Behind.
Questions, comments? Okay. If there are no questions or comments or concerns, we'll move on. 144, standards for victims of violent crimes for board consideration. The next one we're looking at is 210, medication. Is this a new policy?
No, we have a policy and
Yeah.
it actually was up for review previously, and I asked Paul because waiting for some response from our solicitor on some questions that we as regarding this.
I think
With
the
the
questions
medication.
around inhalants.
Well, that policy was approved, the self-administration of EpiPens and
Right.
inhalants. And as you'll see in here, we talked about diabetic materials as well. Because you have issues because the licenses, the nurse's license has requirements, so there's a lot of things you want to make sure you're taking into consideration when you look at the medication. So we did all of the changes we've discussed with our nursing coordinator. We spent a lot of time looking at these. Number one, there we said only FDA-approved medications will be given. We sometimes get requests to give medications that are not necessarily FDA-approved. Nurses are not comfortable with that.
In the cases.
So you're not going to allow people to do like their herbal medicines or something like that they get from the health food store? Like,
I think it's something that the nurses, in order to administer medication, need it in a prescription with a doctor's note that says, you know, this is for this child. When they get something that's not in that format, they are uncomfortable giving that to a child.
If someone has one prescription drug, they have to keep that bottle, you know, they only get one bottle for a month maybe. Then how would they separate the medicine to keep it in that prescription bottle? Or maybe,
I'd have to go back, I'd have to check with the nurses how they do it. They get an order from the doctor.
oh, if they had something in writing, right,
Right.
but it wouldn't be in that bottle. Most likely it'll come in a pill box or something like that for every day.
I'm not really sure about that. I will double check for you, but I mean, I know we've had situations where, because for the nurses, based on their license, that pill that they get if it's not in that bottle, they're not comfortable knowing what it actually is. So I think I don't want to swear to it because I don't give the medications, but I think it's in the bottle when it comes in.
So that should be in the original.
That's what it
That's what it says.
Does that come from the parent directly to the nurse?
Correct.
So you're never going to have a situation where a kid's going to have any kind of prescription.
Only if they meet one of the requirements under self-administration.
Yeah, because it seems like someone can tamper with it to transport from the school unless the parents actually physically have to come and drop it off at the nurse's office. and sign for it.
The parent has to transport the medication to the nurse.
Even
And they have to
high
pick it up
school
at the
kids.
end. If there's any left over, the parents have to come and take it home.
So these are very unique situations where people are put in this situation, where students are put in this situation. It's not often.
It's a violation of the discipline code for a student to have even a prescribed medication in their possession while they're in school.
We have a policy in the delivery stores, it says it has to be delivered by the parent.
Right.
So all these details about self-administration are part of the new language. Delivery and storage of medication is new language. So it's much more mature policy. Any other questions, comments?
Yes. I would assume we don't deal with this at all today, but I got to believe it's coming at some point in the future. And I guess technically it is legal from a prescription standpoint, but cannabis-based medical prescriptions.
We've actually been looking into that. There is issues, legal issues about that then conflicting with other laws about what can be allowed on school property.
Right.
We have not directly dealt with that yet. One of the things our thinking would be that if that needs to be administered, legal advice is that the parent would come in, move the student from campus, administer the medication, and then come back. But that's not been formalized yet.
I was going to say, but with it, just under those circumstances, then they'd be under the influence. If it didn't fall under a doctor's prescription, then it'd be under our controlled substances policy, essentially.
I mean, there are uses of the oils and those kind of things that are very legitimate for certain.
Oh, no, I know that. I'm not arguing that part. But what I'm just saying is that we are likely going to deal with that more and more at some point, so it might be, you know.
We are at, and I agree, because when I read the, you know, in my non-medical background, read the legal opinion that I saw on that, seemed to me a little bit overzealous in its here. So I think we're going to, and the legal opinion I read was not from our solicitor. So I agree with you. We will take that and circle back. We're going to say where we could.
Yeah, that would be good. The federal government, state government can't even agree on what we're doing there.
But it's going to happen. I mean,
Yeah, so if you get opinion for our folks, just to ensure that if we're trying to do the right thing by kids, where it's properly prescribed by a doctor, we're not putting them at risk for
Yeah,
45-day expulsions.
I'm wondering if it's FDA approved. Is medical marijuana, is that
Typically,
basically,
it's
is that by the state?
federally Schedule I, which would, if it's Schedule I federally, I think that you can write a prescription for, but I don't know the answer, that's why I'm asking.
They're still
you.
trying to, yeah, they're still trying to figure it out. The DOJ and FDA, they haven't figured out who's saying what. All right, any other questions about 210?
I guess I was wondering, why did we change it in the first place? Why are we changing this?
We're in a process where we're reviewing all policies.
Yeah, we're changing the whole book.
Yeah, and what we've done, Joe, is contracted with PSBA to manage this process for us. And they recommend language, and they're working electronically, and that interfaces with them regularly. He's referring to PSBA. So they're working through the review process with us, and we're going in numerical order.
Okay.
And more or less, and as need arises, we'll take on any policy that needs to be reviewed. But that's the process.
So 210 is okay to go to the board?
210 to the board. Next on the list is 251, homeless students.
This is probably another one that's a no requirement. But we,
This is the language verbatim as recommended by PSBA.
right. And it's consistent with how we practice.
Good.
I mean, the intent of the law is that homelessness should not bar a child from being educated swiftly as possible.
Who's our district liaison?
In our recent shuffling of administrative responsibilities, that would be me.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm
So in other
all,
words, you go to enroll your child in their local elementary school, you need not supply a passport to show that you own a home or a residence.
right, what happens if the student is, the McKinley-Vento Act is very broad in what it will consider a homeless student. If a student, if anything, during the registration process or even after, when they're already a student here, would suggest that the child might be homeless, it comes to, usually to one of our social workers, and then the three of us will talk and determine if it meets the criteria, and it usually will. And then exactly what you're saying, we don't let that get in the way of anything moving forward. The intent purely is to let the students be here. So even things like immunizations, they don't have a birth certificate, all of that.
How many social workers do we have?
Too busy social
Not
workers.
enough answer.
Yeah.
So what does the district's liaison shall provide reliable, valid, and comprehensive data to the coordinator of Pennsylvania's Education for Children and Youth Experiencing Homelessness Program in accordance with federal and state laws? Is there a regular report that?
There's a web portal that we have to go on. I don't know how regularly. We just did it recently. It's more than once a year, I believe, but we have to report that. So Kathy Ailing in the Child County office keeps a record of who's considered homeless monthly. She will send that out to myself and the social workers, any changes here, and then she uses that data to submit to the state.
And I would assume that the protection of that student record would fall under other policies protecting student records.
There's even a provision about education records.
I don't know that we would note in the record, in the student's record anywhere that they would be considered homeless. I can't think of any situation where that would happen.
The transportation provision is a bit confusing.
Indeed it is. Basically, in terms of transportation, our requirement is to work cooperatively with the district where the student is currently. If you have a student who's homeless and they're living in a shelter in, unless I'm just making this up, and they're living in a shelter and it's located within the Centennial School District, you make what's considered a best interest determination. What is in the best interest of that child to move to the schools in Centennial or to stay here in Council Rock? If it's determined it would be in the child's best interest to stay in Council Rock, then we are to work cooperatively with Centennial, as in this example, to transport the student. You can define cooperatively however you would like.
Now, in that particular regard, because that child happens to be in that geography and we're working collaboratively on transportation, it's not like they have to, we charge them for that student to be here, or do we?
Tuition in school?
Yeah.
No, that's what this would not allow us to do.
Got it, okay, good.
And our transportation folks are very creative about working it out, because sometimes, you know, you get kids that are at a distance, and it's not easy all the time.
We have a lot of homeless students.
We have probably more than many would think. There's all kinds of situations you can have a student homeless. It could be what you typically think of in terms of being homeless. It could be a student whose parents kicked them out of the house. For whatever reason, if they're in what's considered temporary housing, they can become homeless, and that they can keep that homeless status for a relatively long period of time.
They were a student, they were a student before they became homeless. That's what makes them eligible.
That's what makes them our responsibility.
Various kinds of shelters are probably the biggest piece of that, I would guess, but who knows? You don't need to answer that.
I mean, it's to the benefit of the student, and I'm glad we're able to.
Yep. And you feel like we've got the appropriate training here?
And there's also the McKinley-Vento Act requires a homeless liaison. So like in Pennsylvania, the intermediate unit has a homeless liaison. So if we ever have any questions, there's somebody that we can go to there. They actually even have a little bit of money so that we are able to, we have a student that needs certain materials for their program that they can't afford, and that there's a little bit of money available for that. And then through the benevolence of staff, we have money in the district also to help out.
Great. Yeah, I think it's intended to hold feet to the fire for any districts that we're trying to avoid educating homeless students. Any other questions, comments? Not, we'll move 251 forward to the board. 255, educational stability for children in foster care. This is a new policy.
Right, and it's the same arena. And recently, I don't know if it's legislation, but the way we handle foster care placements is very similar to how we handle homelessness. So same situation occurs. If a child is foster placed in a student in a home outside of this district, we make a determination of what's in the best interest of this child. They may stay here. The only difference is that children and youth maintains responsibility for those children. So therefore, children and youth is supposed to assist us in the process, including the transportation.
Okay. So are we often in a situation where a child, would that apply to a child who's in foster care outside of the district?
So if we had a student that was a resident of the district and for some reason became foster placed and was placed elsewhere, that would be the case. That does not happen often.
Okay.
It's more frequent that we have students enrolling with us in foster homes in Council Rock.
So it notes here that a student who comes out of foster care by April 1 can stay to finish the year. Is that an arbitrary date?
I don't know that, but we have that same date for students who family moves. I'm pretty sure it's April 1st. I will check that here. So if a family moves out of the district after April 1st, we have that same provision.
The student can continue without tuition balance of the year.
So if this child then, or any of our children, parents leave or this situation, they're fostered March 15th, and they've got to pay if they want to stay.
That's a very good question.
I mean, the first thing I would say is, if, it seems like foster care is not the fault of the child. So, I would personally, if we have the ability to, I would advocate for a much earlier date, like maybe a half a year or even less. And even for, kids who are leaving because their parents are moving at April 1. And then I know we just went over that policy. I probably should have, said something at that point, but I didn't catch it. I would advocate that date's a little late in the year. So I guess my question is, do we have the ability to influence that date, or is that something that somebody else sets? And if we can influence that date, I wouldn't mind having that discussion with a quorum of the board, or at least hearing from you guys what you guys think.
We're looking at the,
Yeah, I would want to check with Barry because he's the one that deals with those situations.
Policy 202.
I remember we had all those conversations about eligibility, for lack of a better word,
yeah, this is it.
but I just don't like that date all of a sudden. And certainly not for kids who. Anybody over here? Am I alone in this one?
As it may be terms of overall determination.
So you're suggesting that we move the date back to prior?
Yeah, if we're not mandated that date, I would love to have a discussion, or if you guys, have a perspective on the change in that date for this policy specifically, but also if that April 1 date affects other policies, I'd love to revisit that. Because again, let's just say somebody's moving, and they move mid-school year, and they have the wherewithal to have their kids stay in somebody else's home.
What date would you like it to be?
I'm not sure I'm prepared to say. I would think at least half a year.
I would like to check with Barry.
But yeah, I'm more interested in what the educators think, but I would hope anything more than a half a year, we're gonna let them stay.
Is it the date or the fact that they need to pay tuition?
It kind of goes hand in hand. I mean, the fact that they're paying tuition means they're here because there's an approved reason, right? These seem like situations where it's a little bit different than somebody specifically wanting to take advantage of our schools and don't live here. This is one of those situations where, sort of the foster care piece, probably the kid doesn't have any influence over that. So why would we wait till that long to not make them pay? Why would we make them pay earlier than that? But then also for our students who have been here, it still seems like it's an arbitrarily late date to have to pay to stay. But again, I'd rather you guys.
I mean, I can only say that the cases that would have come to my attention is maybe 1 or 2 a year, but
Right.
Barry probably has more. It would only come to my attention if it was
I'm more concerned about the fosters, the
Right.
foster care piece, because in that case, it's clearly not, the kid doesn't have a choice. It doesn't sound like a family would either. Whereas if somebody's moving out of the district, that might be a little more of a family choice where they might try to take advantage of the system.
Yeah, coming out of foster care,
But,
more likely.
but still, I mean, you get a kid changing school mid-year is not, they'll adapt, they'll bounce back. But, to create the hardship of a charge to avoid that for your kid, if it's a half a year out, it kind of bugs me a little bit.
So do we need to table it pending some feedback on the date, or can we move it forward with the existing date and then change it procedurally with?
Well, I think, why don't we, unless somebody else, I mean, I'm curious to hear what the rest of you think, but I would say, let's leave it in, and if you guys come back and say we have the ability to change the date, then maybe we bring it back into committee and have that debated another,
That's fine.
time.
But we have the ability based on what Matt showed us. The question is,
Oh, we do, okay.
it said, did it say
Yeah,
as
the state
determined
debt
by?
is determined by.
Right, so what do you think, I mean, we don't have.
It's already, so you already got it.
I don't want to be the only one driving that.
Since it seems to affect so few students, and I agree, I think your point being we want to create as much stability for these students as possible. That's why I questioned, is it about the date or about tuition? And reading what PDE had, if we simply put it at the discretion of the superintendent on a case-by-case basis, I mean, would that be consistent with what we're trying to do and with other policies? The other policies have the April 1st date.
Well, the other policy is just do it too, as the April 1st date. We can certainly modify the language for that to include, so.
Or if we didn't want to go that way, we could just do it for this policy. I love the idea of giving the administration discretion in cases.
Let me talk to Barry. I mean, it gets hard when you're sitting in judgment. If your reason's a good reason, your reason's not a good reason. So that's why it's kind of nice to have,
Okay.
a rule.
What-
So
what
we
do you-
set a precedence.
What do you guys think? Do you want to?
I would want to, I mean, I would say for the foster care students, I would think that would happen so infrequently. And the kids, and I agree with you, already so much turmoil going on. It certainly would be a fine idea. Like I said, the other one, I just want to check with Barry about how often that comes up to him. Because if
Was
it
the other one, but it's,
for 202.
yeah.
Would it be a bad thing if we recommended a change of, let's just say January 1 on this policy, but left the other policy, so Barry didn't want to make a change to the other policy?
I think the other,
Is that a direct conflict because they're not the same date?
I think the other policy serves a different purpose. I mean, it's a different population. I think your point is a good one. This is the humanitarian thing to do, would be to give more leeway to a student coming out of foster care. And I was thinking January 1 as well. So if you're confident that the number is so low as not to be a financial issue.
For the foster care.
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to happen,
We can always change it back if it's becoming a financial issue.
Right. Is this if the foster home is in district? Is that-
Doesn't matter.
Well, I was going to say,
Doesn't matter where the foster home is.
So they-
so capable of, I don't see.
No, that there's a whole process.
I don't know about that.
Dr. Lambert suggests we table it to the next meeting.
Okay,
And I agree, Andy, I think it's a smart thing to do to go with moving it to January 1 or whatever date that you want to suggest.
yeah, maybe, maybe we don't have to table it. Maybe you can get some feedback from Barry, send the board, an email with the information that you have, and then we can work with you individually to see if, we can debate it in public if people want to make a change off April 1. But if the group is, based on what Barry says, comfortable with it as written, then we can take it to, as far as I'm concerned anyway.
All right.
I'll make it a maybe.
I'll talk about it
Yeah,
tomorrow.
this is one of those easy ones, I think you circulate by email as long as they're responding to you directly. And then we can note that at the board table and discuss it at the board table quickly.
Let me know. I'll send out the note to the board. And then if I don't get any responses, it'll be on the agenda.
Yeah, so procedurally, we're going to move it forward unless we get, all right, that's good. Good. All right. That's the agenda.
Is this subject, Matt, this thing in the back that notes the changes? It's probably a good idea. This is all of it.
For the 100s and the 200s, I forgot the last meeting we had, I forgot to include that, but I'll include that in each.
So I don't want to throw this out because it's helpful.
You can throw it out or you can keep it.
No, it's good to know what the changes were as a summary, so.
Very helpful. Possible to.
I think the rate for anyone.
I'm sorry.
I haven't seen it. I think the next set of policies will probably,
What I'm trying to do is clean up the 100s and 200s. So we'll try to finish up the 135 in the next meeting or so, because when we jump into the 300s, that's all the employee policy. So the three, what happened was, is we used to have 300, 400, and 500 policies for different classification of employees. What PSBA did is collapse them all into the 300s. So when we get into the 300s, it's all Christine all the time.
Yes.
What,
Mostly various stuff.
yeah, I think you're,
Various,
we'll go to the ones who are, we'll go.
yeah, we should actually, where am I? No, I've seen the draft.
So those are mostly things you're gonna need, batteries.
Alright, so then no more of yours.
I don't think so. Keep them. We didn't go perfectly anymore.
No, we didn't, we've skipped around. Some of these have been approved and I haven't approved yet.
Okay.
Very recent.
Like, did you do tobacco orders?
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah, so I think the few that are left in there are probably batteries to take. I mean,
Very
very
recent. Yeah.
So you might be jumping into 300.
Maybe, we have a couple of minutes. Most of them have moved over, so. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, you don't have.
No, good, that's fine. Then we'll move to public comment.
I guess I'll start.
Mr. Hickey.
Yes, Bob Hickey from Northampton. I guess I'm kind of disappointed because I was hoping for, I guess, either someone from the administration, like the superintendent or his assistant, and actually more board members. This is the first policy committee meeting that I know of since the walkout last month in March. And I guess I just had a few questions about it that, I mean, basically, I was hoping for an explanation then of what is the policy. Because clearly, from what I read of policy 220, it was not followed on that particular day. And I would like to know why, if the policy was followed, that there was no consequences for those who did not follow the policy. I was hoping to ask the superintendent that question to find out what his thought was, and I believe I had gotten word from him or somewhere that should we change the policy to say, as long as we're respectful, that the administration or the board may rescind any punishment. Because apparently the reason that there were no consequences for people walking out of the building that day were that they were respectful. From the superintendent's letter, that's the impression I got, was because the students were respectful, there would be no punishment. The other thing that I got the impression was that I wanted to know if he made this decision unilaterally or if he did it with board input. I got the impression that it was with board input. And if that's the case, then I would have liked to have known how each board member felt about administering that policy. Whether, with Mr. Dodwell, you were not part of the board then, so I wouldn't answer that. But much like a board vote, I would like to know whether how each board member voted on whether or not to either discipline or not discipline students who did not follow that policy. Because in some ways, the kids who followed the rules got cheated that day. Some students chose to stay in their classrooms, which was their choice. Other students chose to leave their classrooms, but to go to the quote-unquote assigned places in the school to voice their support or, for the victims. However, had they known that they could have left the building, they chose to stay inside, fearing that there was going to be punishment, when they could have left the building and had a bigger show of support, and yet they didn't because they thought there was going to be punishment. So I just want to question as to why we have this policy and why it wasn't followed and who made those decisions. And going forward, what happens if another group of people want to have a peaceful, respectful walk out of classroom on another particular date, will there be any consequences for those actions? And what are the consequences? Like I said, I was just disappointed that the administration flip-flopped on their decision, but then they said there was going to be consequences for their actions, and then rescinded it and basically went against their own policy. And I don't know if I can get any board input here as to how you felt or you influenced that, or was it something that Dr. Frazier made a decision unilaterally on his own?
I'll start. I think your question's legitimate, and I think I understand what you're asking. And no, Dr. Frazier didn't make that decision unilaterally. He consulted with fellow administrators, the cabinet, principals. I know, there's a widespread respect and feeling that principals really know in their schools what makes sense for their particular school population, how the students are feeling and so forth. And I know Dr. Frazier explained to us that he had talked to cabinet, talked to principals, and used that to guide his decision. He spoke with individual board members during this process to help inform his decision. But, the board did not direct the decision, I wouldn't say. I think this was a unique situation that hopefully we don't encounter anytime soon, where there's this kind of horrific mass shooting or similar tragedy that leaves our students emotionally upset and really sort of struggling to figure out how they're supposed to react. And I think there was a lot of back and forth as to how we should best respond and how we should best support the students. And I know Dr. Frazier listened to a lot of people, including the board, including administrators, and heard the opinions of teachers as well.
So it wasn't if, for the sake of argument, 5 board members contacted him and said, hey, don't punish, don't discipline the kids who leave the building, and 4 said, I really think you should, and he said, up 5-4, I'm going to go that way. So he just took your input, but you did not. The board itself did not vote, quote unquote,
Correct.
on. So the board didn't deliberate, the board didn't vote. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, at that part, I did want clarification on whether or not the board had any kind of say in the matter, which obviously is not true. But like I said, I was hoping that Dr. Frazier was here so I could address it directly as to why he decided not to follow policy.
You should feel free to contact Dr. Frazier directly. I will say that.
Right, this was,
I agree. I think, to your point, he did listen to the board, and the board did have some influence over his decisions, multiple decisions about how that whole situation was going to be handled. But no, there was no deliberation at the group, there was no vote, because that wouldn't be appropriate, both legally and procedurally. I mean, that's not the way a board should operate. And I think we respect the administration and the superintendent to the degree that we wouldn't try to impose our will in any situation like this, unless we felt there was some danger or something that required us to step in.
Sure, and like I said, a greater concern was that he, prior to the event, said this is what's going to happen, and then after the event, he changed his mind. That's, to me, that's disturbing.
I would only say this, and that's a matter of opinion. You want to talk to him about that, that's, could be just an agree, disagree, or difference of opinion. I would say this, that particular day and the time that led up to that day was an extraordinary event. It's like nothing that we've ever dealt with in any situation. So it's really easy to second guess anything that happened. There were a lot of safety issues, potential safety issues, that could have, that you had to think about, much of which would have been unsafe to potentially talk about. I was across the street that day and I watched many adults try to get onto that campus, on both sides of other things. So, you know, at the end of the day, that's a really unique happening. And, you know, hopefully what we can do is learn from it. You asked a good question about policy, and we have policy there for a reason. And it's not a unique and extraordinary circumstance, this is my opinion anymore. So, you know, we have a policy. I would hope that we enforce it going forward, but you never know. You know, you might see something that, you know, you haven't dealt with before. So, you know, I hope we learned a lot from this thing. Thank God everything worked out well. You know, it was handled very differently with many different outcomes. If you watch any of the other school districts, where there was a really broad range of, you know, I saw superintendents and board members or presidents standing and protesting those days. And I saw areas where they said, hey, you're going to be punished, and they were. They had all kinds of things going on at their schools too. So, you know, there really wasn't a right answer, but we got through it. You know, we went through last Friday, no issue. So, you know, we've got a policy that stands, and hopefully we never, ever see something like that again.
Yeah, I mean,
That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think that's
I'm not
Friday.
speaking for the board, I'm not speaking for.
Yeah, there was an incident last Friday somewhere else where someone did leave the grounds and got hit by a car.
Yeah, that was,
Which had nothing to do with the walkout. The kid was using the walkout as an excuse to go walk.
Right, but again, exactly, that. Like I said, you know,
At the end of the day, our concern is safety. All the way around, there's a lot going on with that, David.
I would have always preferred that, like I said, you know my opinion, I would prefer that beforehand, that the superintendent would have said, there would be no punishments for these kids, what happened, and gone from there. Like I said, I know children, you know, students who would have gone outside to show support, but they stayed inside based on the policy. And to not be there is, you know, like I said, I think the superintendent was wrong, and I think he should actually own up to the fact that he was wrong.
all right,
And, you know, I did want to clarify that in his letter, he kind of said board input, and I wanted to make sure, and I didn't say so, but I wanted to make sure that there was no informal board vote that, you know, it's 5-4, 4 were against, so I went with it.
no, I'm not, I'm pretty certain of that because I don't know how all of my fellow board members felt about it. So, I think that's.
Which, if that was the case, I would have then asked for, then I deserve, and the public deserves to know. What was your position?
Yeah, well.
That being said, I all need to know.
Right, there's no further comment. We'll see. Ms. Gannon, you wish to?
I do, yeah. I mean, kind of piggybacking off that. Then I have a 7th grader and I have a kindergartner, so my concern is the future, you know, what will happen in the future. My 7th grader, they handled it, Mr. Hollingham, absolutely wonderful at the school. She chose to stay in her class, and the policy says, you know, students have the right to express themselves unless, I'm gonna paraphrase here, it interferes with schoolwork and the educational process. In her class, they were doing skits that day, that was their assignment. So she chose to stay, I think 17 kids left, so there might have been like 10 or so in the class. They continued to do the skits. They had to make up for the parts of the kids that were missing. Teacher said, everyone that left is going to get a 0 because they're not completing the assignment. I totally agree with that. And then I don't know what happened. The next day they came in and they had to do the skits all over again. So basically that was a wasted class. And my issue is we had all those snow days missed and now this other day is missed. And I get it. I mean, he only did, they sat back here for 17 minutes, went back right to class, quite as debate. But it interfered with her schoolwork and her class. And she had to sit through the same thing twice after she had to make up for her classmates that chose to walk out and did nothing. So that's, again, like, I just don't understand why policy wasn't followed. I know we gave Dr. Fraser numerous times, no response. So that's the issue we have with not having a response. That's why we come here. So that's that. I know it's in the past. So now coming to these, I'm learning a whole bunch of new stuff, and I have questions about medication.
Yeah.
So is there like, is it a, like, I don't know if it's a law or something about like, why can't parents just sign like a paper for over-the-counter medicine? Like, why does the doctor have to be involved?
Gentlemen, can you answer that question? Just
Let her-
Just
I was ready to ask you that.
Yeah, this is my first experience with it this year, and I was like, what? So,
Yeah, well, as soon as he.
I'm sure he'll be fed, if we adjourn, I'm sure he'll be able to answer for you.
okay, that's fine.
Other questions?
Sir, late comer?
Well, it sounds like you may have already said, but so where are we going in the future with these protests and political activities and so on in school? What is going to be the policy for school? I mean, in this particular case, all policy went out the door because it seemed like we were breaking the territory. At least that's the view, I think, a lot of people, policy was in place. We went outside, the confines of the policy all over the place to try to accommodate people's feelings and so on and so forth. But, there's rumblings of kids protesting, having walkouts in support of various political things beyond just this one. Where we go with that?
I'll just restate what I told you. It's my opinion that was a unique, extraordinary circumstance. And I don't have a problem personally with how it went down. And I'm happy to talk to you about that if you want to hear a whole lot more about that outside. As far as going forward, though, I think it's based on what we learned from that, to enforce the policy. Nothing to say that we might not get hit with another extraordinary act. I hope we don't. It's unlikely. But when you start talking about any more walkouts for school protests like 420, personally, only speaking for me, I would be perfectly happy to enforce that particular piece. Any other disruptions in school policy, that policy is there for a place. I think we had a unique circumstance. But
Yes, and I tried to keep the politics out of it. I didn't want to bring the politics into it. I wanted to stick to the policy. Well, one of the issues that I had with it is that the walk and the time, I would have been okay if it would have been in another day, another time. If the council allowed students wanted to express their support for what was going on. What happened was they latched onto a movement that was sponsored by, which was a political movement. And the politics should have been kept out of it. The movement was addressed for gun violence, to get kids to register to vote. The people who were behind the movement was the Women's March. It was
I've heard that, and my point of view is a little different, which is the date was set and the thing got in motion, and then those other political entities glommed onto it, which I thought was unfortunate. But be that as it may, I think the policy is important to use as a guideline, and it should be enforced whenever possible. I think the word extraordinary perfectly applies, and we talked out in the hallway one evening about how my concern, and you were talking about how the kids felt about the shooting in Florida, and I said that has always been my paramount concern. After the safety issue, actually the first thing I thought about when the walkout was building momentum was, this sounds unmanageable, and I'm really worried about kids leaving school buildings in the middle of the school day. That was my number one concern. And then once those concerns were addressed, then, I felt like it was managed quite well in our school district. I'm glad we didn't end up like another school district in the region where a large number of kids were punished for walking out. And that created a lot of ill will and hard feelings. But you and I talked about kids' anxiety, and you made a really good suggestion, which is that we need to give the kids a venue to express their concerns about school safety. And they can talk to our school leaders about what we're doing to enhance school safety, what kind of programs we have in place. And I think that's a really good suggestion.
That was my husband's, I can't take the credit for it.
Well, it's a good point. My biggest concern beyond the safety thing of the walkout itself is the kids' legitimate anxiety.
And it's just like as parents, we see it differently than the kids see it because
Yes.
I guess we have a different view of the world than they see it, which I understand.
Yeah.
And they need an outlet.
Yeah.
Just as much as we need an outlet. I agree, like they feel unsafe, they should have, why do you feel unsafe, and then help fix the problem.
Yeah, and here's what we're doing, and do you have any suggestions? And
Exactly.
that kind of conversation, that would be really helpful.
I was just going to say, it seemed to me in this situation, the students came to the superintendent and asked for permission in this protest versus just imagine a protest where people just got up and left. And that would obviously be pretty easy to punish if somebody just got up and disturbed the class by getting in the hall and nobody knew what they were doing and went out to do protest. There seems to be two different types. If someone just gets up and leaves and protests, that's a big difference than saying, hey, on this date, we want to do this. Student government goes and petitions for permission to do something. And I think that's where he got caught in a situation where he was trying to respect the kids,
I would say respect the kids because it was a disruption. Right. The kids were doing it anyway. So you just got to be best prepared to deal with it regardless of whether you tell them there's consequences or
My understanding was they were saying it was non-political. I see emails before the walkout with parents saying this is political.
The kids admitted that at school working that it was political. Some of the kids, yes. Everybody's naive to think that everybody's got a different opinion on it.
Say it's totally non-political.
Yeah, no, I agree. Nobody could say it was totally non-political. People glommed onto it for political purposes, and that's undeniable. But for many people, the primary purpose was it was a memorial service. It was a commemoration for 17 people who died in Florida, and it was something important for them to do in response.
But then the kids that chose not to walk out, it was like, you don't care about the 17 kids.
Yeah.
Which is totally not the case.
But not all of them felt that way. I mean, my son didn't leave his classroom. He didn't. It was.
Well, no,
I mean, everybody had a different experience.
Right.
Right, but the way that it's phrased, if you don't walk out, and feel like for example, tomorrow in schools, there's something about a bullying thing and a moment of silence.
Yeah.
So if you open up your mouth, you're going to be perceived as you don't care or you're not sympathetic to that cause. Where you are, you just don't want to get caught up in the political nonsense of all of it. So there's really no way out of it. Like,
Our schools have to deal with these kinds of issues on a regular basis, and there's really good character education programs in place, and I think our educators are pretty sensitive to this stuff.
So Chuck's back. We got a question for you, Chuck.
Well, why don't we adjourn first and let Matt start going down and so forth, and Dr. Lambert and Ms. Gandy have a conversation.
Okay.
So if there's no more comment, any board comment? Nope. All right, then we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.